Joined. Joined.
Trustee Bingham.
Joined. 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 Joined.
I don't know how Mom drives this yet.
Joined. Joined. Joined.
Good afternoon, trustees and
Staff, welcome to the board meeting for Monday, August 31st. This is Chair Alex Johnstone, and just before I call this meeting, or I guess just as I'm calling this meeting to order, I am first going to go through roll call to confirm trustees that are here in attendance. Do we have Trustee Archer?
Present.
Trustee Bingham?
Present.
Trustee Buck? Do we have Trustee Buck?
Kenny D.
Joined.
We'll come back to Trustee Buck. Do we have Trustee Danko? Trustee Danko? Trustee Danko? Hearing none, we'll keep moving on.
Joined.
Do we have Trustee Dees?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Galindo?
Present.
Trustee Miller? Trustee Maria Felix Miller?
Tracy.
Joined.
Trustee Maria Felix Miller? We'll come back. Do we have Trustee Mulholland?
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Carol Paikin Miller?
I'm here.
Thank you. Do we have Trustee Tutt with us? Do we have Trustee Tutt with us? Trustee Tutt. Hearing none.
Maria Felix Miller.
Joined.
We'll keep moving on. Do we have Student Trustee Ethan
Joined.
Kessler?
Here.
Thank you. Student Trustee Skylar Ziggy?
Joined.
Skylar Ziggy? Student Trustee Skylar Ziggy. Hearing none, moving on. Do we have Fatima Zakar?
Present.
Thank you. I believe I heard a few other
Joined.
trustees come on, so I'm just going to confirm. Do we have Trustee Becky Buck with us?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And do we have Trustee Maria Felix Miller?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Trustee Paul Tutt?
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we do have regrets from Don Danko and Student Trustee Skylar Ziggy. With that, we'll now move to the Hwdsb land acknowledgement. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on the ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined with the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt represents the treaty relationship between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Anishinaabe with respect to sharing the land and resources thereon. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. With that, we'll now move to the singing of O Canada.
Joined. Joined.
All right, thank you, trustees. Moving on, we'll go straight to reports. We have our school reopening COVID-19 pandemic update number 4. And to that, I will turn to Director Figueredo.
So thank you through the chair. As trustees see in their package, it is update number 4, and it is a long report. And it actually reflects the most recent updates and the changes since the last time we provided a full report to trustees. I just want to continue to thank staff across Hwdsb, especially for our managers and supervisors from our service departments. More than ever, their leadership has been evident in getting our schools open for September. They've been working around the clock over weekends to be ready for this September. And I want to keep coming back to what I say is our most important 2 goals. When I'm asked by the media, what do I see as the most important 2 goals? We know we have the 5 guiding principles here, but there are really 2 that stand out. It's the safety of our students and staff and building a community of care. We have to realize the context our students and staff are walking into is not a context that they left in March. More than ever, the inequities have been highlighted around income disparity, regarding mental health challenges, and most recently, the inequities around racism, particularly Black racism in our Indigenous community. It is so key that we position our startup as such to be ready. Last week, trustees are aware that staff did look at some emerging data that was coming in around further delaying and staggering the start, and the ministry did indicate that boards could sow if there's new emerging data. And the data that we received last week was key, really around our enrollment, the number of students that are in our remote learning, which will be highlighted in our report, and logistically the work required then to staff our remote schools and to staff our in-person schools. But there's some great news here today that will also be highlighted verbally through Stacey around the $9 million reserves and the impact that's already going to have for September startup. Another piece of data that emerged was around the Provincial Outbreak Protocol. We received that last Wednesday. We then reviewed that, or still reviewing that with public health around our 70 procedures and protocols, but the massive training required. So last week we heard clearly on Thursday from our school leaders who are engaged in training and preparation. They were engaged in 2 full days, Thursday and Friday, knowing they have to prepare for 3 PA days to train. And what we realized on that day, the feedback we received, is that they want to do this right, and the resource of time is running out. And we also heard clearly that one of the PA days, which is key, not only around safety, going back to our first 2 goals, but are also around the PA day around anti-racism and anti-oppression training. Our staff as a network, we have a network of staff who have worked over the summer to prepare this training. And they talk about importance in our context, building a community of care, of listening, disrupting, and rebuilding. And this training was going to happen on the same day that staff were going to be potentially notified of their staffing assignment changes. So as a senior team, we talked about the feedback we were receiving. We were challenged by our racialized Black staff network who put their heart and soul into this training. And we looked at ourselves and said, what would it take for us to really look at the systemic structures that are creating barriers to make sure that our 2 goals of safety and building a community of care are not going to be successful because we haven't taken a strategic look at some of the barriers. So by delaying the start and reversing some of our PA days, all of them will happen, but we flipped the order of them to make sure that people were present when it came to the safety training, and also very present not only physically, but mentally, to engage in important work of the anti-racism, anti-oppression training, because the context, again, we're walking into is very different, and this work needs to be front and center. And we were challenged by staff, and we felt it was important that we looked at those systemic barriers and structures and challenged them and hence why we presented to the ministry a delayed, staggered start revision, and the chair and vice chair were in conversations with me and operationally supported that decision. So I thank the chair and vice chair for that work as well. So I just wanted to set that context, and I will pass it over to Peter, Associate Director Peter Sovin, and the entire team. I just want to give trustees awareness that why these reports do come, I know, on Monday, is because over the weekend is where we're actually finding the time to work on the reports and have the most latest information, in addition to the team who worked around the clock, literally, over the weekend to get our staffing process ready to begin as of today. So I'll pass it over to Associate Director Peter Sovin, and I know he'll pass it over at some points to Associate Director Stacey Zuka when it comes to the financial update as well. So through the chair to Peter. Thank you.
And thank you, Manny, and through the chair, good evening, everyone. As indicated, this is update number 4 for our school reopening, COVID-19 pandemic. Similar to other reports, I'm just going to reference the pages in the report and provide some of the highlights within the sections and then take questions. But to reiterate what the director has already said, this is a complete team effort. Every member of Executive Council leads and contributes deeply to the various sections within the report, and more importantly, to the plan and all of the work. This report, while extensive, highlights pretty well all new information or slightly revised information that we had provided previously. And the last time we were before trustees with update number 3 was the 10th of August, and then another follow-up brief report on the 24th of August, and yet we still have 30 pages here of additional information. So it has been coming in, and everyone has been taking the information and applying it to the plans. So let me go to 3-2 and the enhanced public health measures. A number of items here have been either brand new or have been addressed in slightly different ways. The school reopening protocol digital binder, which you'll find in the first paragraph, that contains the over 70-plus operational protocols that have been developed over the summer in response to the reopening efforts. These are not existing procedures that we have as a board, but they are all additional protocols that are specific to enhanced public health measures. And so these have now been made available through a digital binder so that everyone will have access to them. I'm just going to go to section B under physical adaptations. Again, I'm not skipping over any sections because they're not relevant. I'm just mindful of our time with these updates and want to make as much time as possible for questions. So under the physical adaptations, what's worthy to note here is that based on feedback that we had received, we did have facilities management staff, caretaking staff, work in our elementary schools, in our primary, kindergarten, junior, and intermediate classrooms to look at the spacing and to determine where desks and tables would be situated. And as you'll see here, that work is continuing throughout this week to set up desks and tables so that they are approximately 1 meter apart. And where that's not possible, we have also purchased and looking to install additional plexiglass dividers or barriers so that we can maintain not only the distance but the additional measures. Under Section C, masks, still on page 3-2 and then moving to 3-3, we have incorporated here the motion from trustees that extends the wearing of masks throughout all of our grades from K through 12. But in addition, you'll see on 3-3 quite an extensive explanation around the student mask attestation exception process. We are making this available to families, to students who are 18 and older, so that starting this week, August 31st, there will be an ability to indicate whether or not one of the exception criteria is met and attest to the fact that they've read, they've understood, and in fact it is true that one of these exception criteria are met and therefore the student would not be wearing a mask. The exception criteria, the protocol, has been extensively reviewed together with Hamilton Public Health and is consistent with directions provided by the Ministry of Education. I'm going to go quickly to 3-4 and just highlight under both hand hygiene is really just an update that the protocols that we are putting in place, one is pending still Hamilton Fire Services' approval, and that's whether or not we're able to put alcohol-based sanitizer right at the entry of all of our schools, or if that's not the case, then upon entry to the classroom, we will have either the alcohol-based hand rub or washing stations. Then moving to Section E under cohorting, I'll draw your attention to the second paragraph where transportation services, our schools, our school principals, our IIT division have been working incredibly hard to ensure that we have cohorts for our secondary school students who are beginning in the adaptive scenario and have that information available through the parent portal so that they know whether they're in cohort A or cohort B. This is an incredibly complicated task once we move into a class-by-class basis and ensuring that there's a balance within the classes, looking to have no more than 15 students in the class, while at the same time establishing seating plans for those students taking school buses, as the school buses must also maintain an adaptive mode in seating. So that continues to be ongoing. Section F under ventilation, you will see listed there the various actions that are being undertaken by the consultants that have been working with our staff. And as well, the last two sections under F, reports from the consultants will be posted on our board's website so that any issues that are identified and that are being addressed, the reports will be made available on a school-by-school basis on our board's website. And in addition, we have purchased 150 air purifiers with HEPA filters, and these will assist both with the filtration and ventilation in certain rooms where there is been insufficient airflow deemed through this process. And move us to 3-5, just to draw to your attention that in one of the appendices, Appendix A, there is a sample of some signage that we have developed, as well as for illustrative purposes, the protocol that we are having our schools implement, where the signage will go, how it will be put up, and so on. So that just gives you a bit of a sense of the signage and the process that's happening in schools. I will move to section I on 3-5 under screening and just highlight where we are as of this morning, that approximately 21,000 students, that is approximately 49% of the students who are indicating that they are going to be coming in person. The COVID-19 screening attestation has been completed. You will recall, and it's stated in the paragraph, that attendance in person at school will only be permitted once the screening attestation is completed. And so school-based staff are continuing to reach out to families who have not completed the attestation and providing the assistance either to complete the attestation in the portal or through one of the alternative ways that we have listed on our website. Under Section J, the Outbreak Protocol, and the Director has noted this in his opening remarks, that last Wednesday, August the 26th, the province released the Operational Guidance COVID-19 Management in Schools document. This document outlines the parameters for our outbreak management protocol, but what's really important to note is that each of the 70-plus protocols that we have developed in response to the enhanced public health measures need to be reviewed now against the outbreak protocol, and in some cases, slight modifications need to be made. This includes the possibility of needing to adjust slightly some of the signage that we might have. So when we indicated at the last update that this operational guidance document for the outbreak management protocol was critical to have, it was because of the fact that all of the other pieces need to be now checked against it. And then finally, through Superintendent Stefanian and the team, working with Hamilton Public Health and the other 3 local school boards in Hamilton, this document then needs to be translated, for lack of a better term, to a Hamilton outbreak management protocol to be utilized within our area. So that continues to occur, and the communication will be provided as soon as it's available for everyone. Under Section K, supplies. And so when we last met, we had indicated that our supplies had not arrived. Our supplies have arrived. The initial shipment of the supplies have arrived. And staff have been working incredibly hard at the Education Center throughout the weekends to repackage and ensure that each of the schools has the adequate supplies for when staff arrive. This has already started. Many of the schools have received their supplies, and it's anticipated that by the 1st of September, each of our schools will have the supplies, whether that be the PPE, the personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, hand hygiene supplies, and so on. I'll note on Section 11 under public health that while we continue to do work with our Central Joint Health and Safety Committee and welcome their input, I'll also highlight that we are working with McMaster Children's Hospital to look to create a virtual learning opportunity, and we're quite excited about this, having two of their pediatricians join us in a virtual session to provide some information around COVID-19 and also to answer some questions. So we'll have more on that later. Turning to page 3-6, just an update under supports for students that public health nurses, you'll note here that the Hamilton community should anticipate an addition of approximately 19 public health nurses to support in these in the school boards in the area. And it's listed here, the focus of the additional public health nurses will be around COVID-19 health and safety plans. The Section B under supports for students, student mental health and well-being. As the director indicated again in his opening remarks, last week we had the opportunity to provide some introductory training to our principals and vice principals on an incredibly comprehensive resource that's been developed over the summer. And the team has worked, has created an amazing resource that is well beyond just readiness for re-entering a school, but includes an entire focus around equity. And what was previously referenced as 30 lessons in 30 days has been rebranded as Learn, Disrupt, Rebuild at Hwdsb, Building a Community of Care. And the initial training was very well received by our principals and vice principals. And the first segment of this, it will be ongoing, but the first segment of this will be part of the professional activity day later this week for all staff. Under Section C, just again, not only a reminder, but an acknowledgement of the fact that well over 6,000 Hwdsb students, were reached over the summer, whether that's in the summer learning or some of the groups that have been offered, or even individual sessions that have occurred with students and their families. So in addition to all of the planning that's happened over the summer, staff have continued to do the work and reach many, many students. On 3-7, we'll move to Section 3, which is support for staff. And just to highlight here that if you were to click on the link for the program guide to reopening schools, which is now available to all of our educators, you would find a very extensive resource that covers a whole range of suggestions, strategies, recommendations, and covering K right through to grade 12. It's just one of the many resources that continue to be developed and made available for our staff, all focused on the reopening efforts and what we know that staff will need to embrace as we move into this different fall. The remote learning, we just highlight here the fact that for staff, we have very deliberate, dedicated professional learning for those teachers and other educators who will be working at the remote learning day school in elementary. Appendix B just gives you a sense of the vastness of the initial supports of professional learning that's been developed and that will be made available. I will highlight under Section E, occasional staff, that we're really pleased that we're able to offer occasional staff the opportunity with pay to participate in the essential training provided by the ministry around the reopening of schools and around occupational health and safety compliance. And so that is something that is new this year, and we're quite pleased to be able to offer it. Still on 3-7, under Section 4, Engagement and Communications, and this will move over to the next page as well. I want to draw your attention to the second paragraph because, once again, we do want to highlight the fact that there's an incredible amount, it's an unprecedented amount of change that will be occurring. And sometimes not only will there be a single change, but there'll be multiple changes to the same areas as we've seen over the course of the summer through the 4 updates, that a similar topic that we would have presented in early July has steadily changed right up to today. And this will continue to occur even in schools. And we appreciate that this is certainly a cause for some frustration and angst, and that, again, we remain committed to that regular, transparent communication that provides as much detail as possible. But that at times when we're as transparent with the communication, and it seems like, well, we finally have an answer, to only find out a few days later, that's probably going to change, and change quite significantly. We do remain committed to communicating as timely as possible. I'm on 3-8, and we'll just highlight that for our elementary schools, the remote learning has approximately 6,300 elementary students from kindergarten through grade 8 whose parents or guardians have chosen the remote school rather than in person for the start of the year. You will see the charts under Section A, and it's just, I think, worth noting that the distribution across each of the grades, and being mindful that kindergarten there is both year 1 and year 2 kindergarten, that each one of the grades is in and around approximately 600 students, sort of evenly distributed for our English language program. And the distribution is somewhat similar for French immersion. Just to highlight that the remote learning day school will have a start time of 9 a.m., an end time of 3:20, and so although it'll be virtual, those are really sort of those bell times, if you will. There will be 300 minutes of learning activities. There will be 2 40-minute nutrition breaks built in, and staff have been working, as the director said, all weekend to look at the reorganization of schools and also for the organization of the remote day learning school to offer both English language and French immersion streams, our Mohawk language, and where possible, efforts continue to be made to offer our specialized programs. It is worth noting that while we are going to continue to try and offer the specialized programming both in remote and in person, there may be a point where it becomes operationally very difficult to operate in both settings, and at which case we will be back and communicate if that's the case. Move to 3-9 under Section B, the staggered start. And as trustees, I'll note that we were here last week, August the 24th, presenting a staggered start. And as the director has indicated, that has changed. And so late Friday evening, we did receive confirmation from the Ministry of Education that there is support for an adjusted staggered start. And you'll see in the chart here that the staggered start does not change the first day of school where all students will return. It continues to be Wednesday, September the 16th. But what has been adjusted in order to transition staff with the vast number for the remote learning day school and the number of reorganizations, staff reassignments that will need to occur the first 2 days of the 8th and 9th of September will be needed for the staff transitions to the new assignments, as well as the remote learning day school training.
Sorry, Peter. Folks, if you can just make sure that you're on mute, and someone seems to be pressing a button on their phone. So folks, if you just want to be mindful, because we can hear the beeping. Thank you. Continue, Peter, please.
Thank you. And through the chair, as well, you'll note that on September 10th and 11th, again, receiving feedback from our initial version that orientation for students in their first year of kindergarten or JK will occur on both the 10th and 11th. As well, we are planning for the remote learning day school to have a welcome and orientation, obviously virtually, on both the 10th and 11th. I will continue on that page, beginning at the bottom, number 6 for secondary schools, and then move to 3-10. Before trustees, in the bottom of 3-9, 3-10 through 3-11 to the top of 3-12 are again examples of a four-period day school and a 5-period day school, and what the timetables or schedules will look like. Of particular note is that we have included within the explanatory charts that the study hall will be made available for students throughout the afternoon segments, and I'll speak to more of that in a moment. As well, that we've highlighted in the charts that dismissal occurs at the end of the day unless there is permission granted to dismiss earlier, and that school bus transportation will be provided at the end of the day. And again, we can speak to more of that later on. On 3-12, under study hall, I do want to highlight the fact that work continues. We had indicated last week that we would provide more information this week. Unfortunately, we're not able to provide too much more information other than we continue to work closely with Hamilton Public Health. We continue to work very closely with OSSTF and our ad hoc committee to look at being able to provide supervision as well as situate the study halls throughout each one of our secondary schools to meet the public health requirements and the Ministry of Education's requirements around the number of direct and indirect student-to-student contacts that one can have over the course of a 2-week period. Remote learning, again, this is just an update that beginning this week, we are asking that secondary school students contact their school if they do know that they will be choosing for the entire first semester not to attend in person, and their preference would be then to shift their timetables to full e-learning courses, and that would happen again starting this week. The staggered start will assist in that transition by providing some extra days to make some of these timetable changes. Section C, staggered start, but in some ways still connected with the remote learning. It's worth noting that in our secondary schools, typically the week prior to the start of school, right into the first week or so of school, and our student trustees had highlighted this in our previous update as well, is an incredibly busy time for our student services, for our guidance departments. As students look to change some of their courses, possibly change some of the aspects of their timetables, and that's in a regular school year with a regular startup. This year, this will all be compounded, of course, by students also looking to potentially change to fully learning courses. And so the staggered start that you see on 3-13, September 8th and 9th will provide the additional days for some of those timetable adjustments, not only for students, but in some cases, staff timetables, assignments will also need to be adjusted, and again, for the study hall readiness. So I'll move to 3-14, and what we have done in light of the staggered start, we've made an adjustment to the rotation start dates so that now each rotation will be anywhere from 20 to 21 days, as previously it was 22 days. And so that adjustment, again, is due to the staggered start, where the first 2 days are just focused on timetable adjustments. September 10th and 11th will focus on those students requiring some additional transition supports in person, but then also leveraging the opportunity to connect with students in each one of their classes remotely to do a bit of an orientation and a welcome. But that classes within the course would actually begin on Monday, September the 14th, again in a staggered way, the way that we had presented it last week. Staying on 3-14, again, new information in this report, all about continuing education and our various programs that we offer for adult and continuing ed, our adult credit programs, our adult ESL, literacy and basic skills, as well as international classes and some other offerings through continuing education that trustees will find are either following a similar model as we are in secondary schools or are being moved completely to a remote learning session. On 3-15, this section, in terms of students requiring special education support and services, what we've highlighted here in the report is the transition planning that our Specialized Services Division has been working with our key system principals and staff in developing. And so for elementary schools, we'll just highlight here that by and large, it is felt that those students who are in regular and self-contained class placements, the transition planning will occur similar to the students in other classes, and that is on the 14th and 15th. They will come in smaller groups on one of those days, with all students returning on the 16th. For secondary school students, just a slight difference, and that is that students who are in self-contained class placements will begin on the 14th of September in class with a small group. The other half of the class will attend on the 15th of September, again in a small group, and then with all students returning to school as a full class on the 16th. And it's again worth highlighting that students in these programs may attend on a daily basis, and so the transition does look slightly different. On 3-16, you will see that both for elementary and secondary schools, a small number of students with some significant or pervasive needs will require further assistance with transitions. And what is planned then for the 10th and 11th of September will be scheduled in-person visits with students and staff. Schools are reaching out starting this week individually to families to invite them to a scheduled time for these in-person transition visits. I will go to 3-16, just to Section 8 under transportation, and as was highlighted before, transportation continues to be an area where planning has been happening both in secondary for the cohorts, but also in elementary in terms of the routes. Families have been contacted for those eligible for transportation to ask whether or not they will be taking school-based transportation at this time, reminding them that if they are not taking school transportation, that there are three other points in the year where they can come back and take the transportation, and those coincide with our transition times from in-person and remote, October the 13th, January the 4th, and March the 22nd.
Joined.
Staying on 3-17, I will just bring your attention to the technology section. This has been asked in previous updates, and again, just a reminder that in secondary schools, we do have our one-to-one device deployment as part of our 21st century learning strategy, and that in an effort to ensure that we eliminate access to technology barriers, we are working with our schools to better understand if there are specific needs in terms of access to technology for those selecting remote learning. So with that, I will stop my update and pass it over to Associate Director Zucker, who will provide an update on the financial implications in Section 10.
Thanks, Peter. And if trustees follow along in your report, I'm just going to speak to the B memo that was released on August 26th. So that would have been late Thursday evening. We found out about additional funding. The first funding relates to additional teaching staff, and Hwdsb will receive about $1.5 million for non-permanent and supply teachers. So this is in addition to the $933,000 that we were already receiving, and in addition to the $9 million from reserves. So just as an update, and this is very good news, Board staff worked over the entire weekend to do the reorganizations for the schools, to remove the remote students, to add the classes to the remote school, and to add the additional classes approved by the board last week. And based on this, we're very pleased to report that the average class size for in-person for kindergarten to grade 8 is about 21. So this is down from 25.7 in kindergarten, from the projections, 24.5 in 4 to 8, and it is lower than the amount that we spoke of last week when we calculated it before removing the remote learners. So we were able to stay within the amount approved by the board and use the $933,000. And again, the class sizes for all of the grades is about 21. And that's in each grade. It's not, I'm not just speaking as an overall average. The second thing, the next bit of funding that we received was the school reopening emerging issues. And HWDSB will receive $2.3 million. It's to be responsive to local issues. So after Thursday night, we've been looking at what our remote and our local issues are, and we will be monitoring the reopening and determining those needs and how that $2.3 million should be used. But I'll give you an example. Right now, there are many staff that were in the education center packaging PPE for distribution to schools, and that will become something that we need on a permanent or temporary basis. And so that's something that we would look at out of these funds. The next section is additional PPE. So the board's not receiving the funding directly. Instead, we will continue to order from the ministry, and it has been confirmed by the ministry that we will not be charged for these orders from the ministry for PPE. So we continue to order from them. There's funding set aside for the PPE, but it will not flow back and forth between the ministry and the board. The ministry will just allocate that funding to the PPE, and the boards will continue to receive it without charge. The next section would be transportation. The board's receiving about $400,000, and it is to reduce the number of students on the buses or to address other pressure areas. This is something that we're reviewing with the consortium, working with the coterminus board to not only look at issues that are affecting both boards, but we are also looking at things that would affect HWDSB specifically. The next section would be remote learning. There's $550,000 to support school administration. And as you can imagine, with over 6,000 students in one school, there is a significant administrative function that will be required. The next section is additional special education and mental health support. The board received another $228,000, and that is to support special education and mental health local needs, and we are reviewing to determine where this should be allocated. The next section is additional public health nurses. The province will receive 125 more to be spread across the province. So we don't know yet what that means for us specifically, but again, that works through the city, and the city being then the public health nurses able to support HWDSB. And the last section is an amount that the ministry has set aside, $50 million, to address future pandemic education needs, and it's a future pandemic response fund. So that's a high level of all of the additional funding that we received. And again, the great news about the hard work that was done over the weekend to do an entire reorganization, and the in-person class sizes being approximately 21 for kindergarten to grade 8.
So are we turning back to Peter at this point?
Thank you, we can. And through the chair, so the only section left is section 11 on 3-18, and that's just to indicate that our next regularly scheduled update on our reopening will be in a month's time at the board meeting on September the 28th. Of course, if something else were to come up that's urgent, we would provide that information in a more timely way. That's it in terms of the report. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. And just before I turn to questions, I want to take this opportunity to thank our staff, all of our administrators, tech staff, everyone who's been working over the weekend, over late into many nights. We appreciate all the work that you are all doing to ensure that we have a safe September and a successful reopening. To that, I am going to turn now to questions from trustees. And moving in reverse order tonight for this report, please note that student trustees will be asked questions after Trustee Cam Galindo, so right in the middle. We will begin with Trustee Tutt. Trustee Tutt, do you have questions?
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. My question through you, essentially, and I might have missed this because my phone keeps cutting in and out, but I think there was an announcement from the federal government with regards to additional funding. Do we know fully yet what that looks like at the local level and what that impact is? And have we taken that into consideration, or are we still waiting the details for that? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I think Associate Director Zucker just presented, but I'll turn over to Stacy. Stacy, if you could just quickly highlight the page numbers of the report. I believe it's 3-18, but I'll turn to you, Associate Director. Sorry, Associate Director, we're just not hearing you. Associate Director Zucker?
Sorry, had to remove the mute. You're correct on the page numbers, and that was where all the information with regards to the additional funding is. And with regards to the class sizes, that is not in the report, as we have been working on it up until today, and so it wouldn't have been timely to put it in there at that time. So that's why we're verbally updating right now.
Trustee Tutt.
Got it. I appreciate that. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Tutt. Moving on to Trustee Carol Paikin-Miller.
So have we got an idea of the size of the classes yet, or is this something we're still figuring out?
Thank you for the question. I'll turn now to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. And through the chair, actually, I'm going to pass this over to Stacy because the teams have been working, as she indicated, all through the weekend to reorganize, and we do have a sense of what the class sizes do look like. I'll pass it over to Stacy for a more exact number.
Thank you. And through the chair, again, the average class size for each of the grades is approximately 21. Some of them are maybe 20.8, and some of them are 21.2, but they're all very close to 21, and it's consistent across every elementary class.
Okay, so we're and this includes kindergarten. Obviously, they've brought the numbers down considerably, but not yet low enough for me. But anyway, I would love to see them at 15, all the classes, but I guess it's unrealistic to think of that.
Thank you. Do you have further questions, Trustee Paikin-Miller?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you so much. Trustee Mulholland.
To the chair, to Peter and to Stacy and Manny, thank you very much. The report was very informative, so that too, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Maria Felix-Miller.
Hi, thank you, everyone, for a very thoughtful report. I do have a few questions. So first off, in regards to ventilation, I noticed we've specified here about 150, I believe it's the HPA, the HEPA filters for our system, and that those will be offered to schools where there are classrooms that have no ventilation. And I'm just wondering, one, if I've understood that correctly, and two, could I just get some clarity around how we're deciding where they're going? Is that an adequate amount? Is that something that we're going to be looking to increase the number of filters that we have? I know I've received several emails from parents at two of my schools. I've got two schools that are newer in infrastructure and then two schools that are over 100 years old, where the top floor is very, very hot. There's very little air circulation. So I'm very curious to hear just kind of how we're allocating that. Are we earmarking any particular area of school, or is that just across the board?
Thank you. I'll turn to Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, it is FM staff, so facilities management staff, that is currently reviewing where those 150 filters would go. It will not be proportionate to schools because obviously in newer schools there may not be the need that there would be in older schools, so it will not be proportionate. It will be where there is insufficient airflow, meaning that there are windows that can't open and there's not there's no supply and return air, so not either or, but both. We are still looking to make sure that we have the correct numbers. We will increase if it's necessary. We're verifying them, but we do feel that the number should be sufficient to start, and we'll confirm that with the work that's being done by facility staff.
Director Figueredo.
So just to add to Stacey's comment, in the financial implications, the federal money that's been given to boards.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear him at all.
Emerging issues. So if we have resources there in case we see this as an emerging issue as we head into the season, and also around future pandemic fund, the ministry has held back $50 million as Stacey has identified for educational needs. So we know that they're based on the data they collect from us and emerging issues. But we're confident with this that the third-party company that's been doing inspections, that those inspections will then dictate where those 150 portable units will go to begin. But just to Maria. Sorry, through the chair. Hope people can hear me now.
Yes.
My apologies. To Trustee Maria Felix Miller, to build on what Stacey had said in terms of it will be enough, I think it's important, the financial piece, to highlight that there is money in this current allotment of federal money around emerging issues that the board has received. So that allows boards flexibility to look at what are the emerging issues that during startup, whether it's staffing or whether potentially it's ventilation, that we could purchase more. And also, in addition, the ministry has been clear that there's a $50 million that they've held back for future pandemic education needs. So they're going to base that allocation based on what they're hearing from school boards as we assess our operational implementation and what might be emerging. So confident that what we're getting now is 150 portable is based on the third-party vendor's assessment and inspections. But as things emerge or as we head into the winter season, there'll be an opportunity to always monitor and measure that, and knowing that there's funds that we could access currently now or future funds the ministry is going to be providing through the chair.
Trustee Miller, further questions?
Yes, thank you so much for that. That's a wonderful answer, and thank you, Associate Director Zucker. I'm just curious, as a follow-up to that question, whether or not trustees will be getting an itemized list of which schools will be receiving what, if they are receiving filters, how many they will be getting, just so that we can take it back to our communities if we do have, a school that's asking us that in a higher rate, if we'll be able to give them hard data for that. Obviously, I respect everyone has a ton of stuff on their plate right now, but even if it's just in an email, that would be really useful, I think, to be able to communicate that to our community members.
So I will turn to the director first.
So hopefully everyone can hear me. So thank you, Trustee Maria Felix Miller. The first part we did indicate in the report under Stacey indicated we'll make the inspection reports public on the board website, but we will, once we have the data in terms of where these units will go, we can also make that information available as well. We definitely will bring that information in the next report at the end of September, because as trustees have asked for a monthly monitoring report. But we'll take that away of where we can make that public and inform our trustees and potentially our school leaders through school councils as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My next question is about, I very much respect staff putting together the mask exception attestation. I am curious, I've been speaking to many members across various communities who are very concerned at the implementation of the mandatory mask that we passed last meeting. And I'm just wondering what is going to happen if we see a large influx of parents filling out that form. Are we just going, are we just prepared to accept that and kind of maintain the motion, or will we be reviewing our policy around that? Or I know we've been having conversations around with, asking staff if we can maybe do a check-in towards the end of September to just see how the masks are working, particularly in the lower grades, whether or not it's a feasible requirement for our very, very young students. So I can appreciate if there's no answer to that question at the moment, but I just thought of it when the report was highlighting that there is going to be a form to be filled out, and just some of the comments I've been hearing back from parents, if I could get clarity around that.
So we do have a response. Director Figueredo?
Well, thank you to the chair. I'll begin, and then Peter, if he has further information, or Sharon, who's been working closely to public health. So I think the first thing, which will be key and important, is around the education and the transition into this new reality. As we're working with public health, and we also have McMaster Children's Sick Hospital also providing a presentation that trustees just received an invitation to as well, about understanding the layered approach to all these strategies we need to put in place, and mask being one of them. To your question around reviewing it, so the ministry policy, grade 4 to 12, is in the ministry guidance document, so that's mandatory at a provincial level, and they've asked us to put an exemption process in place. So we're applying that same exemption process to the local decision that was made for K to 3, but we will, at the end of September 28th, I believe it is, a board meeting, we'll bring the next monitoring report. And at that point, we will be able to provide data to trustees in terms of, overall, maybe K to 3 versus 4 to 8 or 4 to 12, how many exemptions or attestations have been received by division, so trustees have that data. Also, the ministry will be asking us to monitor that as well. We're aware of that in terms of this as well. So only at that point when the data is brought back, trustees will then have an opportunity to discuss, and the motion that they put at a local level, which is the K to 3. I'll ask if Peter or Sharon have any more information around the attestation exemption process we're putting in place with support of public health.
Joined.
Through the chair, I will ask if Superintendent Stefanian has any additional information, as she's been working really closely with Hamilton Public Health, as well as the guidance from the Ministry of Education to establish this exception form. Sharon?
Thanks, Associate Director. And through the Chair, thank you. Really appreciate the question and the concerns that the trustee is bringing forward, or the questions that she's bringing forward based on conversations within the community. I think one of the overriding pieces that I share with trustees is to keep in mind that the wearing of masks by students is part of our layered approach to mitigating risk with respect to COVID-19 and to mitigate potential spread of COVID-19. So if we were around non-medical masks alone, that absolutely is not enough. It is the layered approach beginning with screening and not coming to school if students are unwell or have symptoms of COVID-19. It's rigorous adherence to the hand hygiene guidelines that we have, and that includes hand washing, hand sanitizing, the importance of physical distancing, as well as practicing respiratory etiquette, cough, sneeze into the elbow. So it's all of those layers together, along with the wearing of the non-medical masks, which help to protect each other and, as I said, to mitigate against the spread. So certainly we see the importance of our students within our schools to be wearing the non-medical masks, but we also recognize and understand that there are reasons why for some students they may not be able to wear the masks. And you can see the exception criteria outlined in the report for trustees this evening. Really focusing in on those reasons that have a medical connection to them, whether that is physical, developmental, sensory, or mental health reasons. So the intent behind the attestation, as the director said, is for families or an adult student to indicate if for one of those reasons they are in a position where they are unable to wear a mask. It's not an approval process. It's not that our administrators are approving. We are accepting the attestation from the family indicating that their child or themselves, if they're an adult student, they're unable to wear a mask for one of those reasons. And we have, as we've created our posters and our learning material, really want to support the importance of wearing masks and sharing the why behind it and educating as to the why, but also honoring and respecting that there may be reasons why someone is unable to wear a mask, and so validating that position as well. Certainly don't want to see, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, keep going. Now
Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yeah.
I'm sorry, my headset disconnected, so I'm not sure where I lost connection with you. But I'll just back up a little bit and say within the work that we're doing, we really want to be able to validate both the wearing of masks, but also recognizing that there are some students who will be unable to wear masks and want to ensure that that position is validated as well. I'll also share with the trustees in the material that has been developed for schools. There are lessons that speak about mask wearing, how to wear a mask, why we wear a mask, how to take a mask off. So I hope that answers the trustees' questions.
Further questions, Trustee Miller?
Thank you. That was very helpful. Just a couple of two more questions, and then I will pass the mic along. So, tech support for families at the elementary level who are doing remote. Do we foresee any problems here? I know that we have prioritized, for obvious reasons, the one-to-one at our secondary level because of the heavy amount of remote learning that our secondary students are going to be required to do this year. But I'm wondering if we're foreseeing any potential just gap in supplying appropriate tools for our secondary students who might not have either internet or devices or enough devices at home to participate remotely.
Director Figueredo.
So thank you. Through the chair, I will go first. And Associate Director Zucker can add more from an IT perspective. We don't see a problem at all, and it's based on numbers knowing we had to distribute thousands of iPads for one-to-one during March to June distance learning when we were closed, over 6,000, and we still had iPads that were still in our schools, so we still had more that we could displace. So we don't see a problem at that at all, and I'll just ask Associate Director from a operational lens if there's anything else to add in terms of the numbers.
Thanks, Manny. And through the chair, that's correct. We do have some iPads centrally that can be distributed and will be distributed if necessary. We have our grade 9s to distribute as well, but we will look to coming up with a process that anybody who needs them, it wouldn't necessarily be automatic. If you're doing remote learning, you get an iPad, but if there is a necessity there, then we will look at a process on how we get those devices to those families.
Further questions, Trustee Miller?
Thank you so much for that. That's wonderful to hear. And just one last question. I want to commend the amount of work that our staff has done around the class averages. It's incredible, and I know that 21 is not it's not 15, but it's also not 28 anymore. So I'm personally really, really grateful that staff has been so careful with our direction and the conversations at this table, and it's a credit to the amount of work that our staff does every single day. One just quick question around, I know we've got the October 13th option for families to move either from remote to in-person or in-person back to remote learning. And I'm just wondering how we are navigating, how we're going to manage that if we do see an influx. I know we mentioned it at the last meeting, but considering how nice those averages sound tonight, are we fairly comfortable that we could absorb a large influx in October?
Thanks for the question.
Still maintain a close average to that?
Thanks for the question, Trustee Miller. And I have Director Figueredo has a response for you.
Through the chair. Thank you for the question, Trustee Felix Miller, and I'll ask Peter to add in as well if there's more information. As you know, the registration process ended, and we are reorganizing our schools as of now in staffing. But for those families who did not, we defaulted them to in-class, in-person. So those numbers that Stacy had shared of getting our averages from kindergarten, which we were just under 26 average to about 25, and our 4 to 8 average, which was around 24.5 to 21. It's based on those families who did not register coming in person. So they'll give us greater flexibility to move students to remote, simply because we don't have to worry about the layered approach of interventions because of COVID, like physical distancing. But we do have the opportunity as well at the end of September, that October date, leading into October, will be another time that we'll be taking a snapshot of our enrollments and where people have landed at the end of September. So there will be some shuffling done, but we're confident by the default being in person. If parents do choose remote in September, it actually will potentially lower our in-person numbers even more so. But I hope that answers the question. Through the chair.
Trustee Miller?
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. I'm all good for right now. Thank you.
Moving on to our student trustees, we'll start with Fatima Zakar.
No questions.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Ethan Hessler.
Yes. I just have one question. Through the chair, for the screening process that all the students will have to do, will that be posted through Parent Portal or on the HWDSB site? Just because there's a lot of parents who are having some issues with that program.
Thank you, Ethan, for such a great question. I'll turn to Director Figueredo.
Ethan, thank you for the great question. And to acknowledge the Parent Portal, we know there's still challenges, and we have staff working on that around the email addresses getting in is so key. We know in the long run we'll benefit from that. But to your specific question, is it in the Parent Portal, or if it's not, what other options will there be for parents to access the exemption attestation or any of the attestations? If I can either pass to Peter and Sean, our Manager of Communications, is also with us today, but I'll pass to Peter first if he can give an update to that important question. Thank you, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. So while we do recognize that there have been some challenges with accessing Parent Portal, as noted in the report, last week we were very fortunate that we had many of our staff in our elementary schools, our office staff, return and to begin to do some of the reach out to families, and also to assist as families were contacting the school, struggling with being able to access the portal. And of course, this continues in secondary schools as well. The hope is that, or the plan this week is to continue that outreach and to provide as much assistance as possible so that the attestation can be completed in the portal. If it's not completed in the portal, as we've indicated, we do have alternate means for the forms to be completed and then inputted. The preference, of course, would be to help guide each family through accessing the portal, not only because of the attestation, but because the portal continues to be a very rich resource for families to obtain just-in-time information, such as timetables, cohorts, and that. So we really prefer to help guide them towards accessing the portal, but it won't be a barrier if that's a concern in terms of the attestation. We do have other means to be able to complete that, as well as having translated the attestation in several languages. But I'll pass to our communications manager, Sean McKillop, if he has anything else that I've missed.
Thank you, Associate Director. And through the chair, we are working through a process where we can have an alternate option of a paper copy. Now, of course, during our enhanced public health measures, we are unable to have drop-ins to the school. So we are working through a process that we will be able to have students come in with paper copies like when the school year starts. As well, we are working with our office staff to be able to support any of this communication over the phone. So more information will be shared to help guide us through these alternate arrangements if the parent portal is unavailable to parents. Thank you.
Student trustee, do you have further questions?
No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to Trustee Galindo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we are fortunate to have so many dedicated individuals working in public education here in Hamilton. It's clear that staff are doing the best they can with what they have, and for that reason, I'm very thankful. I'm also thankful to the many parents that have been exercising a good degree of patience and understanding during this difficult time. At the end of the day, we're all on the same page, and we're all on the same team in our fight against COVID-19, so I'm very appreciative of that. Most of my questions have already been asked, but I do have to build on two questions. With regards to class sizes, again, building on Trustee Miller's question, if during one of the re-entry points a large number of students transition from e-learning to in-person classes, Are staff confident that we can absorb the influx of students to maintain a class size of 21 across the district?
Thank you, Trustee Galindo. I'll turn now to Director Figueredo.
So through the chair, thank you for the question. Where we're very confident, the first interval, which is October 13th, yes, we are, because that is an opportunity where we can reorganize and actually reassign teachers to different schools. That could be also reassigning a teacher from a remote school back to a physical school. The other entry points would be a bit more challenging because we wouldn't be necessarily reorganizing our entire system. However, we believe by then that once parents have made their decision by the end of October, they're likely going to stick to it, and we'll leave a little flexibility. And we'll see as the ministry gives us additional funding. As you saw, the first allotment has come. There's a bit of flexibility here of some funding, as Stacey has stated, about 1.5 for teaching. It gives us a little bit of flexibility, and they said there's also an amount for operational challenges. So the other two intervals where parents would choose, we would have to then look at those other funding sources to potentially see. But the first one, October 13th, we're very confident that we can maintain it because we can reassign our staff and reorganize our schools.
And on that note, through the chair, will we have empty classrooms come September with the amount of students that are doing e-learning? And with that come the next transition point, will we have enough space for that influx of students? So we are going to have to start creating classes again to maintain the 21 ratio.
Thank you. I'll turn to Director Figueredo.
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. So a good point that Trustee Galindo indicates that by the number of people choosing remote, that if they do come back, the spaces that were created, that were emptied, could be challenged as well, that we might have to go back and use some of those spaces. But we will revisit that after the October piece. And if we're challenged by space, we'll indicate to the trustees as part of our monitoring. But knowing that we still have the larger spaces in our schools, that if we have to use, like our learning commons, like potentially other learning resource rooms, we'll have to revisit all our learning spaces and even large spaces we said before, like gymnasium, although it may not be ideal, we have to consider all spaces.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Changing gears now, like I said earlier, most of my questions were asked by trustees already, but building on one of those questions, with regards to air purifiers, do we have an official policy on whether or not students or parents can send air purifiers to a classroom, or if teachers can bring air purifiers for that classroom? I know that we had a discussion around fans a few weeks ago, but with regards to air purifiers, will students be allowed to bring an air purifier into the classroom?
Thank you. I'll turn to Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair. No, parents will not be able to bring their own air purifiers into the classroom. Anything that comes into the classroom would have to be purchased by the board and make sure that it meets all of the health and safety requirements and that we know how it's been maintained and that it doesn't create any kind of hazard. So, no, we would not want our families to bring in any kind of external devices. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And to build off that question, would school councils be able to allocate funds to purchase air purifiers for their schools?
I now turn back to Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, there are some parameters around fundraising, and first of all, there will be no fundraising in the beginning of the year anyway, so we have a little bit of time to take this away and determine if this is something that we can support, but there are fundraising parameters about purchasing capital items, so if the trustee doesn't mind, if we can take that one away and report back at a later time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Those are all my questions at this time. Thanks again to all staff for all the hard work. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Turning now to Trustee Deese.
Thank you, and through the chair, again, and I want to be respectful because I know this has been very, very challenging for staff, and like many have said, appreciate all the work that's been done. A few questions is I'll start with elementary, and there was, I think it was made note that if the student wanted to take off their mask, then they would be able to go out into the hall as long as they were distancing or safety measures were in place. Is that correct?
I'll turn to Director Figueredo.
Thank you, through the chair, and I'll ask Peter or Sharon to add. I think what's key when we get into masks for everyone is around the educational component of this. We know that this is going to be an adjustment. We know what the ministry document indicates that when they're in outdoor spaces, they can take their masks off, or during, obviously nutrition breaks to eat. We know we're going to have to work with students to help guide them, especially students who might be wearing a mask and who might be dealing with some health challenges.
Sorry, Director Figueredo, I'm just going to pop it. Folks, if someone's not on mute, please do mute yourself. You can hear some talking or shouting or whatnot going on in the background. Some busy work. Director Figueredo, please do continue. All right.
So, thank you, through the chair. So we're going to be working with our staff to talk about that. We know what the ministry expectation is that they must wear them at all times. But we know that some students who might be challenged at a moment will have to find the right way to manage that and to encourage them to put their masks back on. We also want to encourage in the fall as much as possible to take, we know we're going to have to build in breaks where students do get fresh air and get some time, even as a whole class, to get comfortable with putting masks off and taking masks off and providing as much learning we can sometimes in the outdoor space, especially in the fall. So that's what we're going to be working on, and I said earlier, with children who really might be struggling, and then we'll work with our families to identify around what the exemption process will be.
Thank you. Further questions, Penny?
Yeah, thank you. And another question in regards to ECEs. I believe it's a ratio.
Just one moment. Trustees, somebody's not on mute. And so we can hear various voices in the background having a discussion. So, folks, please all look at your phones right now and mute yourselves. Move to a private room if you can. Thank you. Trustees, can you please put yourselves on mute because I can hear that you're not on mute.
Thanks, Alex. In regards to DECEs, is the ratio, if I recall, is it 20-1 before a DECE is in the classroom?
Director Figueredo?
Through the chair, and I'll get Jamie Nunn to confirm, but an ECE is added to a full-day kindergarten classroom once the student enrollment surpasses 15. So once we hit 16, we add ECE. I'll ask Jamie just to confirm that I have that accurate.
Thank you, and through the chair, that is accurate, Director Figueredo.
Thank you, through the chair.
Okay, so it's 15-1. So that means that there will be ECEs in most of the kindergarten classes, so there will be extra help, correct?
Director Figueredo?
So through the chair, that's correct. If we have classes with more than 15 students, then there will be an ECE assigned like we do every year.
Thank you. In regards to cohorting, it was mentioned that it was going to be up on the cohorts have been assigned and would be up on the parent portal today. Has that happened?
Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you, and through the chair. So appreciating the questions. So starting today, the available information would be posted on the portal. However, in most cases, schools and transportation services are continuing to make changes to the cohort assignments. So the moment that they are available, they will be posted. This is a very, as I indicated before, a very complicated process to ensure that when students are assigned to a cohort, if they are also eligible for transportation, that the criteria for the bus that they are assigned to is met in terms of being in an adaptive mode, as well as for each individual classroom that they're assigned to, that the number stays in and around the maximum of 15.
Okay, and will the so they're going to be in the parent portals? Will they also be available to the students through the hub? What the cohort that they are in?
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So at this time, no, the plan is not to make it available through the hub. It'll be available through the parent portal, which is connected to our student information system. That's where the most accurate information would be listed. It would be duplicating efforts in order to put it in the hub. And because this is changing moment by moment, we wouldn't want to have a duplicate effort somewhere else. This will be the one place where students will find out which cohort they're in, as well as what their timetable is.
Okay, thank you. And then I want to ask about remote learning in secondary. So it's my understanding, like I said, there's the two options with e-learning and remote learning for students that don't want to attend that in-class session. So when they're not attending, so they can continue with their the not in-class courses as synchronous, as if they are part of that other group. But when they are supposed to be in class, they would be working on independent study, correct?
Associate Director Sovereign, please.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, so starting on 3-9 in the report, and then right through, I'm just looking at the pages through to 3-12. Under section B, remote learning, we do try and explain as simply as possible the choices that students do have in secondary school if they do not want to attend in person. And so while one of the choices would be, as you've indicated, Trustee Dees, would be a fully learning, the other choice would be that perhaps a student at a particular point in time may choose not to attend in person, keeping in mind that the rotation model only has students attending every other day for one course in the morning in person. If they were to choose not to attend that course in person, and the reason being for that is that they're choosing not to come in school, which is fine. The attendance for them would be noted as an excused absence. They continue to be in that course, of course, and would continue with the assigned work. The only difference would be that those students who are in class that day in person would be receiving direct instruction. Those who have an excused absence for that day would not be receiving the direct instruction. But on the alternate days, when their cohort isn't in class, they would continue with their studies in the hub. And as well, when the rotation shifts to fully remote, they will continue with their class in a fully remote. So It is one of the advantages of the rotational model is that students do have an option of not selecting complete virtual learning for an entire semester by opting at times, if they want, for however long that they feel they need, not to attend in person, while at the same time continuing to learn with their class.
Further questions?
So thank you. And Superintendent Dunlop was kind enough to kind of walk me through this whole thing, because there has been a lot of confusion and a lot of questions coming from staff and students in regards to this. The one question that I was asked too is in regards to the independent learning that would happen, is that the teachers, so for the class, if they don't attend the in-class piece in the morning, that they would be doing independent learning at that time. So is that independent learning that the teacher will be assigning through the hub?
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. Depending on where in the rotational cycle a student would be attending in person and then opting not to attend in person, we should keep in mind that students are enrolled in all 4 courses for the entire semester. And so they're receiving instruction, feedback, expectations are being covered for the entire semester and not just for that, one point in time. So while they may be engaged in independent activities, the independent activities would be part of the entire course over the whole semester. And so in some ways, it would not be any different than a student who is being excused from attendance to an in-person class when we would be in a regular school year.
Thank you. And if a student needed help during that independent learning, I'm assuming that they would just reach out to their teacher as normal, and then the teacher would get back to them, or is there somebody else assigned to helping students if they are struggling with independent learning?
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So at all times, again, I think it's important to emphasize that students will be engaged in all 4 courses throughout the entire semester. And so if they do need assistance at any time throughout the course, whether it's during the in-person portion, whether it's during the days that their cohort is not there, or if it's during the remote portion, their teacher is always the first point of contact. There is other staff, of course, available through student services that would be able to assist as well. But the first point of contact is always the classroom teacher.
Trustee, further questions?
Thank you. Yes. And okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarity. And I want to now go to sort of the study hall. And I know I recognize there's you're still working on this, and it was only just over a week ago that we got this scenario. So I understand that there's still some questions to be answered. But I just so in the study hall approach, we're keeping cohorts together, so cohorts of 15, depending on how many students from that cohort would attend the study hall. So it could be anything from 1 student as from that cohort up to 15 students that would be attending the study hall. I guess I'll stop there. So is that correct?
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So, Trustee Deeth, the answer right now is that we're still working through all of the details of establishing the study hall within each one of our schools, because each one of our schools is unique, as you know, in terms of their physical layout, in terms of how many students will even be remaining for the study hall, how many staff are available to provide the supervision for that. What we do know is that when we do establish the study hall process, it will always be with student safety and well-being front and center. That's why we're working closely with Hamilton Public Health and looking to ensure that the ministry's direction around the number of direct and indirect contacts that students have with other students will be maintained over that 2-week period. So it may not look as clean as a cohort from one class moves into a particular study hall. However, if that's not the case, there will be other layers that we will put in place to mitigate that level of contact. So apologies that we don't have more tonight, as we had indicated last week that we would, but that's just how long this has been taking, and it was one of the factors that we put before the Ministry of Education in terms of adjusting our staggered start is the complexities with the study hall, and we did hear back that this is not unique to our board.
I appreciate that. I mean, I know there's a lot of concern and anxiety around the study hall and what it's going to look like, and you know, if students are going to get breaks and that. So I understand that. So, and I guess keeping in mind that these cohorts, because if they're coming from one class, they'll be obviously each student will be then part of their own courses, so engaged in different synchronous learning for the afternoon, correct? So within a cohort, you could have different students engaging in different classes or in synchronous learning, correct?
Associate Director?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess another question around that is, will our Wi-Fi handle it?
Associate Director?
Thank you, and I'm going to pass this over to Associate Director Zucker.
Associate Director.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, and through the chair, we don't have any concerns about our Wi-Fi at this time. When we have all 1,500 students in our schools using the Wi-Fi on different devices, we don't have an issue. So that the connectivity that we have, we feel will support the study hall model.
Wonderful, thank you. And I imagine this is one thing that you're still working out as well, but the supervision ratio, is that something that's still being sorted?
Associate Director Zucker? Sovereign, I meant.
Yeah, actually, I'll take this one. Unless, Stacey, you'd like to take it. Thank you for the question, and through the chair, that is one of the factors that we're looking at in terms of the amount of supervision that would be provided, and again, appreciating that it'll be dependent on the location that the study halls will take place, and we fully anticipate we'll need to utilize multiple locations within our secondary schools for study halls, and so that too will factor into the supervision. Thank you.
Trustee?
And I'm just putting this out there, is that would there be some benefits to the study hall around mental health or mental health supports available in the schools at that time?
Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you, and through the chair, perhaps Trustee Beef, if I could, I'm not quite clear on your question.
Trustee?
Sorry, I'm just meaning during the study, meaning that students are still in the school building, would they have access to any sort of mental health supports while they're in the school building, which would be a benefit to being in the study hall?
Associate Director, Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair. So, as we've indicated in the report, one of the challenges with study hall is that students will be assigned to a particular area on a desk, and the overarching expectation will be that they will be at that space for the duration of the time that they're in the school. That said, we will always have the availability of resources for students who require them and that may need that additional support. So the short answer is yes, the resources will always be available throughout our schools. The additional challenge, however, is that this is what we're working on with Hamilton Public Health in terms of some of the measures that need to be in place in order to minimize those direct and indirect contact points.
Trustee?
Thank you. And I just ask, and I think this is, a concern that's come forward by a lot of parents is during these study halls, if we're expecting these students to sit through, the next 50-minute sessions, that's a long time for a student to sit or stay in one place. So I hope that as we get more details around these study halls, that there will be opportunities for students to get up and, in a safe way. But just highlighting that. Like I said, I know there's going to be more details to come. I have another question in regards to SAL students. What is happening with our SAL students?
Thanks for that question. I'll turn to the director first.
So thank you, for Trustee Deed, for that question. So I will pass over to Superintendent Sovereign to provide that. But as you see in our report, there's a section on all our programs for specialized services is offering. But in addition, you raise a great question because SAL, Supervised Alternative Learning, we have sort of two offers. One is still attached to the school, and sometimes other students who are in a SAL program and meeting sometimes in sort of community settings. So I'll pass that over to Peter Sovereign to respond, or one of his team members to respond, who is overseeing SAL. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And through the chair, appreciate the question. I'm actually going to ask Superintendent McPherson, who has responsibility for those programs. In fact, we were just having a conversation today with our principal who oversees those programs. So over to Superintendent McPherson.
Thank you, and through the chair. Yes, we have had those discussions around what it will look like for our SAL and for our SAFE students, our alternative education students. Because students in these programs, our courses are loaded to no more than 16 students, then we are able to offer in-person education for our students on a daily basis. We are currently looking into different locations for our SAL outreach programs, which we know go out to the community, so that we can confirm the different locations for them. But at this time, our SAL students will be attending on a daily basis.
Trustee?
Wonderful. That's good to hear. Thank you. And my final question is around transportation. Again, I know it's challenging, and we're going to see, I think, it become even more challenging as more information comes out. I recognize that. I would just hope that, again, I'm going to talk about the inequity in what's happening with our rural students not being able to get home for the afternoon potentially. So I would ask, would it be possible to, because I know there's still a lot of things we have to figure out, who's taking the bus and what's available and all this kind of stuff. Would it be available to, would it be possible to have staff come back in September to review transportation at that time?
Thanks so much, Trustee Dees, for raising that important question. I'm going to turn this over to the Director for a response.
Thank you, Trustee Dees, and you've identified that this is challenging and no situation is ideal. And we know each year in transportation that one of the things is to deliver on our promise, and we know we still have to provide transportation at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, and every year we head into September challenged with about 20 to 25 routes short. The Transportation Governance Committee, that's a governance committee that the Chair Johnson, myself, the Associate Director Zucker sits on, as well as the Catholic Board. We're meeting Wednesday morning to get an update on the driver status for this September. But this will be a topic that we will bring to the Transportation Governance Committee, because what we do know as September comes, once we get open, and the data we have now and the data that will emerge September might change. So Chair Johnson and I will bring that to the Governance Committee for discussion with our co-chairman's board because of the consortium supports vote in terms of what you've suggested, and then we will report back after that meeting through the Chair.
Trustee?
Thank you. And at that time as well, could we, as this all unfolds, an opportunity...
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end. Welcome to Ready Access by CenturyLink. Please enter your access code, followed by the #. Thank you. Please stand by. Please state your name after the tone, then press #. You will now be placed into conference.
Here.
Joined.
Do we have Trustee Bingham?
Here.
Trustee Buck?
Here.
Trustee Danko?
Here.
Trustee Deese?
Here.
Trustee Galindo?
Here.
Trustee Maria Felix Miller?
Present, thank you.
Trustee Maholland? Trustee Maholland? Trustee Pagan-Miller is unable to get back on the line. Do we have Trustee Paul Tutt? Trustee Tutt? Hearing none. Moving along to student trustees. Do we have student trustee Ethan Hessler with us?
Here.
Thank you. And student trustee Fatima Sakar?
Present.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that, folks. And Trustee Deese, you were in the middle of your last question.
Thank you, and I'm glad it wasn't something that I did. I just So finishing off with the transportation, my concern is that the study hall option not working for some students, but them not having the ability to get home because there's not transportation for them. So I just ask that you give that consideration, and I know there are reasons around the end of the day for a number of things, but I just ask that you give that consideration, and that if we can look at it again in September when we have a better idea, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe it was you who did it, Trustee Deese. Just kidding. With that, moving along, do we have
Joined.
Danko on the line? Do we have Trustee?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful, Trustee Danko. You're up.
Yes. Thank you. And through the chair, I want to, again, just echo the things that we've heard. Staff have been, again, working around the clock. I know this has been a very long 5.5 months since COVID started, but certainly a very long summer for many of you, and just appreciate the ongoing work that's been happening with the steady stream of updates that we then have to respond to. So thank you for that. I also heard a number of questions that I had asked by my fellow trustees, so I will try to focus in. Let's see, I have a number of questions that build on previous questions. So I'll start by, Trustee Tutt mentioned the ministry funding through the federal government that's funneled through the ministry that's coming to us, that is now providing us funding for PPE. We received extra funding for HVAC. Can I just clarify what that means for our $2.1 million that we had budgeted for these items and a couple of the other safety measures that will be in place this fall?
To Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair. So it's a very good question, and we're still working through how much of that $2.1 million we've actually spent. We did order some PPE earlier, not through the ministry, but obviously not anywhere near the amount that we would be spending throughout the year. So we will have savings in that $2.1 million for sure. What that means is that we will use less of the money this year, so there may be more once we complete our year-end. Today is August 31st, which means it's our year-end date. So anything that we've bought and had delivered before today would have been part of this current year that we're in, 2019-20. Anything that gets delivered after tomorrow is part of 2021 and would have come out of next year's contingency. So it should free up more of our contingency for next year for sure, and possibly provide a little bit of more of a reserve as we wouldn't have had to spend all of our savings this year.
Thank you. That's great news. Trustee Miller mentioned the average class size, 21. That is amazing news, and I hope our families are happy to hear that. I wanted to clarify, though, what we're committing to, because staff have previously talked about the need to have some flexibility with class sizes, because we expect there may be circumstances where students have to shift from remote to in-person and vice versa. So can I just clarify, I'm not expecting that we're committing to an absolute average of 21 across our system. I think that's fantastic to start at that point, but I'm expecting that we need to have a bit of wiggle room, and that average number can go up a little bit. Our goal, if I recall correctly from the last report that was brought to us, was to get all classes below 25. And kindergarten, we were looking at a number around 22, 4 to 8, I think it was around 24, if possible, or 23. So can I just get some clarity on, just so that people have clear expectations in the public, if those class numbers do creep up a little bit?
Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you. So we are committed to having the smallest class size as possible, but you are correct in that we cannot 100% make that commitment. If more students choose in-person learning than remote, or more choose to come back, then we may have to have a little bit of wiggle room. But our intention is definitely to keep the class sizes as small as possible. As you recall, when we looked at class sizes smaller than 25, we were still able to have that physical distancing of 1 meter that we were hoping for. So this really is a great outcome from the reorganization that took place. And as we move into the September reorganization, we should be able to stay relatively the same. And as the director mentioned, when we move into the January and March options to be able to move back and forth, that's where things may change a little bit. But we are committed to the smallest class size as possible, and committed to the physical distancing.
Thank you. So again, great news, and thank you for that work. And I know the reorganization has been a massive amount of work. Can I just ask, and I know that this has come up previously, were we able to take into account transportation? I think that was one of the goals, putting siblings together, for example, twins that we often split up, considering whether students are in before and after school care. Were we able to factor as much of that in as possible when we did establish, or as we're establishing the classes for elementary in particular?
Associate Director Zucker. Or
I'll actually turn this to Peter. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, so that work is ongoing in terms of the actual class organization. So certainly transportation is one of the variables. But the other is sort of the before and after school care. So that information is provided to schools. Schools are now engaged in actually the process of reforming those classes as best as possible, considering, again, all of the usual variables that they would consider when assembling classes. And then in addition to that, those added considerations of before and after school care and the transportation.
Thank you. I'm sure families will be happy to hear that it is being worked through in the best way possible with the help of the school, and not just a central database that spits out numbers. So thank you for that. So just moving along, I know that remote learning was brought up. I think a couple of trustees mentioned it. And I've asked this question before, so I'm going to ask it again in a different way, hope for a different answer, I guess. We've already talked about remote learning and what that looks like for secondary school, and I do have a concern that students who need to opt for remote learning that do not want to choose full e-learning because maybe they hope to transition back into in-person classes can go 20, 21 days without any direct instruction from a teacher in one of their courses. So recognizing that they'll rotate through, they will have opportunities later, that is a bit of a concern. But I'm wondering about remote learning for students who have to isolate. And as we roll out the protocols and communicate with our families, now that we have the ministry guidelines that are not as specific as I'd hoped, if a student has to isolate, if their siblings then have to isolate with them, or if a class has to isolate, and we're talking 2 weeks at home, the ministry document does mention that they would shift to remote learning, and we'll need to be flexible and allow that to happen. So what does that look like, and who teaches these students who are isolating at home or who are sick at home but not ill enough to be in bed and can actually be doing schoolwork? Because I can imagine for some families, this may end up being a significant amount of time this fall.
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, and appreciating the question, Trustee Danko, and I know that you've asked a similar type of question in the past, and the answer will really depend on the particular situation. So, if, for instance, now that we have the information around the Outbreak Management Protocol and are working through that, if an entire class, including the teaching staff, were to need to shift to remote, then they would continue in that remote learning mode. If we have individual students who would be required for a significant period of time to shift to remote, and not that they are ill and unable to attend, we're continuing to work on that sort of on a case-by-case basis. But at this time, what we're not working towards is moving students in and out of in-school and remote school. So continuing to work with the relationships that are formed between the classroom teacher, whether that's in person or remote, and the student and their family. Keeping that together is really critical, but we are looking at those unique situations where a student might be away from school for an extended period of time, is not ill, is able to continue to engage, and yet the entire class is not in that situation. And again, part of our working through that is unpacking the provincial guidance document around the Outbreak Protocol. I don't know if Superintendent Stefanian has anything to add to that, but I'll turn to her.
No, nothing to add. I believe we've covered it.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that we don't want to necessarily shift students between remote and in-person classes. It would be like changing schools every time that happens. So for continuity of the curriculum and instruction, I totally appreciate the Associate Director's comments, and thank you for sharing that you're working on that. Relating then to the Outbreak Protocol, I know parents and families have been eagerly awaiting the details. What happens if? And I know that board staff have been working through this with Hamilton Public Health and the other school boards, and I appreciate that we're looking for a consistent approach across all boards in Hamilton. When can we expect to communicate to parents and families what the details of all of our protocols are going to be? Will that be happening before the school starts, leading into the beginning of school, recognizing the short turnaround time we have with the timing of the ministry releasing that document?
Associate Director, Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'll begin, and then I will hand it back to the director if he has any other comments. But I'm just looking in the report, just to point trustees to the section around engagement and communications. Again, a really important piece that we communicate not only around the Outbreak Management Protocol, but all the various protocols that are established at the school level. So on 3.7 and 3.8, we do highlight some of the ways that we are dividing both system-level communication, so more generally speaking, and then asking schools and supporting schools to provide those specific examples of routines that are, very unique to their schools, and to begin that communication as soon as possible. So I'll ask the director if he has, or our communications manager, Sean McKillop, anything else to add.
I'll go straight to communications manager McKillop.
Thank you for the question. We are certainly working on that very proactively right now. We have the protocol. We are working with our public health colleagues, and we are also working with Superintendent Sharon Stefanian. So the Outbreak Protocol is of great interest to us and to families, and we will be posting that as soon as possible once they are approved, and once we are able to check that large document with all the other procedures that we have in place. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic news. I know families are really eager to get this information. Okay, two last questions. Device deployment, I have asked this before. I know we're working through processes to make sure families who have a need for remote schooling, they will have devices when their children are in remote school. So I appreciate that process is happening. What happens, again, for the student who needs to isolate and maybe a sibling then becomes ill, so they're isolating for 14 weeks times 2 between the two of them? What if they need a device to engage in, whether it's independent study or some kind of remote learning that's not our remote school? How might we, or is it even possible to deploy devices in the moment as we go through this fall, and as students will have to spend some time at home if they're sick and not able to come to school?
Director Figueredo.
So thank you. So to Trustee Danko, that will be critical. We said in the beginning of the report that we have to eliminate any barriers, and one thing we learned in the spring is that we found ways to make sure that the devices were deployed at a school, or in cases they were shipped to schools through our procurement department. We actually packed up and sent them through courier, and if that's a cost we need to incur to get them to a house, and that's what we will do again.
Thank you. So last question I could ask for, but I'm sure I've taken up plenty of time. A lot of families are asking how will IEP meetings and how will IEPs be managed this fall, and maybe that's something that we're still working on, but is there any information we have for families at this point?
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm going to pass this over to Superintendent Blair, because this has been something that we've been, diligently working through, particularly with the remote learning day schools. So, Superintendent Blair.
Thank you, and through the chair, it's a great question, and because we want to minimize the number of visitors in schools, we will be looking at a remote or synchronous way to conduct IEP meetings and or IPRC meetings with families. We did this in the spring, and so we will continue to do this using, for example, Microsoft Teams. In the spring, we were able to provide documents to parents so that they could see how to unencrypt documents that we sent so that they were secure. As well, we'll continue to support parents to use Teams, and we have some kind of fact sheets or supports so that we can engage them. And we did also do this, not just around IEP and IPRC meetings, but we also did it in relation to early intake meetings with families. So we'll continue to do that and offer additional guidance to our school teams. So great question. Thank you so much for asking.
Thank you. And again, thank you to staff, and I'll echo Trustee Galinda's comment. Thank you to parents and families. This has been a very trying time. We're all in it together, and I know we all are hoping and working towards a smooth back-to-school transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Danko. Trustee Buck.
Yes, thank you very much. So, so many of my questions were answered already, so I'm very thankful for trustees who came before me that brought those to staff. I did have a couple still. The associate director had said we're looking into plexiglass in places where we couldn't physically distance desks by a certain amount. So I wanted some clarification that if we're not just looking into the plexiglass, but that they will in fact be in schools installed in time for our students returning in just a number of days. Is that something that can be confirmed?
Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, through the chair. We have ordered some plexiglass dividers. We are waiting on delivery, and then we will be looking at where they are needed in order to be able to, again, support the having a barrier when physical distancing is not possible. So yes, they have been ordered, delivery by the end of this week, and working next week to get them installed.
Further questions, Trustee Buck?
Thank you very much to the Associate Director for that answer. I would like to spend a little bit of time on our French immersion. I appreciate so much reading this morning or this afternoon when I got my package that we were going to be able to offer French immersion remotely. So I take that as a big win. Can staff give us any kind of idea of how this will function? Will it look much like we anticipate other remote learning to look? Or will there be any necessary breaks, or sorry, not breaks, but any necessary differences than what we're expecting with our other remote classes?
To Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, I am going to ask Superintendent Torrens, who's been working really closely on this and overseeing the remote learning day school. So, Superintendent Torrens.
Thank you, Associate Director Sovereign, and through the chair, it's our intention and our planning is moving towards having delivery of French immersion to as closely mirror the delivery in the regular school as possible within the remote school. And I would suggest that we're not planning for any difference in experience for a student in the English versus the French immersion track. Thank you.
Trustee Buck.
That's great to hear. I appreciate Superintendent Torrens for those comments. I was wondering, a major concern that I had heard from some of my parents was that they wanted to opt into the remote learning, but didn't feel, because we weren't guaranteeing that we were going to be able to offer the remote learning in FI, that they could make that choice for their children. So I'm wondering now if we have any kind of wiggle room where we can offer remote FI for those families who otherwise would have earlier if they'd known that this was an option.
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through the chair, appreciate the question, Trustee Buck, and understand the situation that families right across our system have found themselves in terms of, making their decisions based on the information that we had available to provide to them in as most of a transparent way as we could, based on what we knew was available. And so, as we've indicated, the reorganization that has taken place over the weekend, that's continuing over the next few days at the school level, that's really critical in terms of having our in-class numbers accurate. But if there are those unique situations where a parent feels that they would like to move from the in-person to the remote prior to the transition time. We would just ask that they work through the school through the superintendent's office so that we can see whether or not that is a possibility.
Trustee Buck?
Thank you very much for that, Associate Director Sovereign. I will move on from FI. Again, just thank you so much that we're able to offer that for our remote FI learners, so they're not losing any of that instructional time that they so value. I would now just really quickly, remote learning. You had mentioned that there were some specialized programs that we likely will be able to offer. I know that you'd also mentioned that there's going to be definitely a difficulty in operationalizing some of these programs, but I was wondering if you could kind of give us a glimpse into which, I hope that wasn't Peter, if you could give us any information about what specialized programs we do anticipate being able to continue remotely.
Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you, and through the chair, and yes, Trustee Buck, I'm still here. I will ask Superintendent Torrance to respond to this because, again, I know that he and the team have been working with the data that has come in from those families who are choosing remote learning and looking at it from a lens of specialized programs and which ones we might still be able to offer and what that might look like. So, Superintendent Torrance.
Thank you, Associate Director Sovereign, and through the chair. Based on enrollment and parental choice, we've come to discover that a large group of students from the Mandarin language program at Coutts Paradise had chosen remote learning. And as a result, we're planning at this point, pending staffing, to bring those students into one classroom that will be a multi-grade classroom and attempt to provide as much of the Mandarin language programming that exists currently at the physical school of Coutts Paradise within that remote school. However, we are mindful that with a reduction in enrollment at Coutts Paradise, that also puts pressure on the remaining program for the students who chose to stay in the regular day school. Thank you.
Trustee?
Okay, that's great. Just a little glimpse into it. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about that in the future. Okay, so another concern that was brought up to me by a parent was that Toronto District School Board had identified high-risk schools in their system. Have we done anything similar to this, or are we kind of working under the assumption that our already identified high-priority schools would likely be those high-risk schools for any kind of an outbreak? And if so, are we looking at any special measures at those schools to mitigate that risk?
Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm actually going to ask Superintendent Stefanian because we do have some timely information on this. So, Superintendent Stefanian.
So thank you to the trustee for the question. And through the chair, we have been having conversations with public health with respect to the data that they have available locally with respect to where we have seen instances of COVID within our community. So at present, the data we have does look at incidents of COVID within census tract areas. What we are looking for and hopeful that we'll be able to get a further breakdown that identifies specifically which schools are within which census tract areas and whether there are other specific data pieces that we can use to be able to plan together We do have a meeting scheduled with Public Health this Friday to talk a little bit about the data availability and how we can use that data to proactively plan for our school.
Trustee?
That is wonderful. Thank you to Superintendent Stephanian for that clarification. Just glad that we're being proactive about where our higher risks are and making sure that we're paying extra close attention in those areas. The one other question that I have would be in regards to our before and after school care. Now, I'm assuming, so we approved the staggered start to school last week, and I'm assuming that the struggle that will be for parents who were counting on having their kids in school on our previous calendar on those dates, that we, like our board, likely isn't able to work with the companies that we have that are in our buildings providing that before and after care. But I was just hoping to get a little bit of clarity around that and see if there was anything we could do. We have shift workers or healthcare workers that we're really relying on having the kids back on their regular schedule. And I just wondered if there was any way that we could be helping these families while they're trying to make this transition back to a regular schedule for their family.
Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you for the question. And through the chair, again, I'm going to pass it on to Superintendent Stephanian, who also has responsibility for our before and after school care. And again, very timely question because we were having this discussion just this afternoon. Superintendent.
So thank you again to the trustee for the question, and through the chair, we certainly can appreciate the challenges, and we have wonderful partners that we work with who provide wonderful support and services to families. So to offer up, I'll say a clarification because it has been a question we've received. We do have before and after programs in our elementary schools. We do also offer the birth to 3.8 child care in our schools. So the birth to 3.8 child care is not impacted by the changes in entry, and so those programs will continue to run in our schools. The before and after school programs, however, are impacted, and they will resume in our schools the week of the 14th of September. So both before and after will be available on those days. We recognize that it is a challenge with the staggered entry, and it presents challenges for families during that particular block of time. But unfortunately, we won't have before and after programs operating on those days because of the structure.
Trustee Buck, further questions?
Thank you for that clarification again, Superintendent Stephanian. No further questions. I just thank you for the many hours that everybody around our table has been putting in. It's been a summer like no other, and I'm really glad to have the group of people around this table that we have. Anyways, no further questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Trustee Buck. Trustee Bingham, do you have questions?
I have a couple of questions, please. But I do want to say, just the same as everyone, thank you so much to all the staff and to the staff who are stepping into the schools right now, taking on that part of the responsibility as well for all our parents. And I hope our parents do understand the amount of work that absolutely everybody is doing. And it is brand new for all of us, and everything is last minute, all of that. I'm hoping that tonight's meeting translates that to a lot of our constituents out there and the families. My first question is around Glenwood School. The day school, is it going to be just, again, opened? Or are we going to be doing a slow entry again, re-entry? I realize there's going to be extra help there. There's going to be a lot of things there. But how are we opening up Glenwood for our students? Thank you.
And I'll turn to Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm going to pass this over to Superintendent Blair as she oversees, as you know, both specialized services, but in particular, Glenwood School. So, Superintendent Blair.
Thank you so much. And through the chair, it's a really good query because, again, while we have a small number of students in there, we want to make sure their transition back is successful. So in addition to what's in the board report this evening, there are a number of resources that the school team and in particular the administrator will be sharing with the families this week and next week. There will be in-person visits scheduled for all those young people in that building. And then, of course, the following week, they would start on a staggered entry. If some students did need more time to go through a staggered entry and additional days were required, of course, the schools would accommodate that. And in addition, our third-party protocol for staff from, for example, the LIN will be in place, and the administrator, Mr. Graves, is familiar with that because he was on the summer ad hoc committee for specialized services. So again, there's outreach, and today I know Mr. Graves is making calls, so he will continue to make calls just to have conversations with parents. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's great. I'm glad to know that it will be staggered. It will be as they need it as we go through. So with knowing that absolutely everything has been a trial for all of us, everybody, I'm still getting a few emails that from parents saying that they still can't access the portal, or if they have sent something in, they haven't heard from someone about whether their student is going to be there or not, all of those things. My question is, when we receive these emails now, what's the best process, or who can we send it to or forward it to? And thank you, Superintendent Dunlap. And I have forwarded a few to Superintendent to find a place to be able to have contact for this parent. What would be the best way for this parent to have a reassurance from someone when I receive an email from them saying that we still can't, we don't know, blah, 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 stuff like that, basically.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Associate Director Sovereign, and then it will probably turn over to Communications Manager Sean McKillop. But Peter?
Thank you. And through the chair, I think your earlier comment, Trustee Bingham, is really important, and that is we're at the pivot point now where all of our planning that has been done at a system level is shifting to the implementation at a school level. Our schools, our staff are there, and so no different than a regular school year. As parents have questions, concerns, that first point of contact remains at the school level, and by extension, the superintendent's office connected to those family of schools. So where there are still questions, concerns that are specific to a school, even if it means that the question is about how do I access the parent portal in order to get the information about my child's timetable or be able to do the attestation, that we would ask that we continue to work through those same school-based channels at this time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. we will make sure that they get back to the school somehow. And again, thank you to absolutely everyone for such hard work. And yes, it's all coming together now. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham. Trustee Archer, do you have, is there any questions that you have, please?
I mean, are there any questions left to ask? I do have a question, is the public health. What is the responsibility of public health? What do we expect them to be doing in our schools next Tuesday? I mean, I know what I assume or expect, but what is the board, or are they involved, will be involved in our schools next Tuesday?
So I'll go to Superintendent Stefanian. Superintendent, I think you might still be on mute.
My apologies. I was on mute, so I am sorry for that. So certainly appreciate the trustee's question, and I'm just going to ask a clarification. I believe the trustee is asking with respect to the additional public health nurses who are being assigned to support schools in COVID measures. Do I have the question correct?
You're correct, yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So we are hopeful that public health will have those nurses in place by the beginning of school. When we met with them about 2 weeks ago, that was their plan and that was their intent. And as I had mentioned earlier, we do have a meeting with them on Friday, so we will have an update in terms of where they're at, in terms of their general planning and recruitment for the nurses who are focusing in on COVID support. They will be continuing to provide the regular support through their regular complement of public health nurses, and so it's not that we're seeing that service no longer exist. So I assure trustees that that work will absolutely continue. In terms of the role and the focus for the nurses, the information that has been provided is that they are there to provide support to both school boards as well as to the schools in the development and implementation of our COVID protocols and the plans that we have in place. They can provide or will be providing specific support with respect to infection prevention and control, screening, questions that families may have with respect to testing. They will have an active role with respect to outbreak management, and if in fact there are positive cases of COVID, they will be supporting both the case and contact management of those cases. They're available to provide support, communicate, assist questions that parents may have. They have a role with respect to working with our before and after school programs, as well as staff who are within the school. So I hope that answers the trustee's question.
Trustee Archer, further questions?
Yes. So public health will be doing the screening, not parents. I have concerns from parents that have heard that some schools, parent council, or parent groups will be at school on Tuesday doing the screening and making sure the students have their masks on properly. But that is the job of public health, yes?
Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you, and through the chair, so just to provide clarity, if I understand Trustee Archer, your question, the attestation for screening is the responsibility of parents. And so the process that we've established is that parents will do the screening each day. They have attested to the fact that they understand what this screening entails and what they are to do if any of those measures are indicated, who to contact, overarching this, of course, is that, a student is to stay home if they're exhibiting the symptoms, if they're feeling ill. But the purpose of the attestation is to ensure that each parent and each student that's 18 and older has the responsibility for doing a daily screening. But I'm going to ask Superintendent Stefanian if there's anything else that she wants to add in terms of clarification on this.
So thank you, Associate Director Sobran, and my apologies if my answer was confusing or misleading. The role of the public health nurses are there to help support understanding why screening is an important process. And as we spoke about earlier this evening, we know that that is a fundamental layer when it comes to mitigating COVID within our school communities. And so as the Associate Director has indicated, it is the responsibility of the parent or the adult student and the responsibility of our staff members or anyone coming into a building, one of our buildings, to engage in screening before entry. The role of public health is not to screen, but to be there and available and provide support around why screening is an important measure.
Trustee Archer?
Great. Thank you. Yes, I understand that, and I just want to make sure very clear that it's up to the parents. Thank you. Last question is, we have plexiglass on order. If it's not available Tuesday, schools still are open and ready to go on Tuesday, yes?
Director Figueredo?
Thank you, Trustee Archer, for the question. Yeah, just a reminder, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we are open for staff to begin transitions, and then we start on Thursday and Friday visits for students in JK, and then also students with mental health or special needs to do some personalized visits. But I just want to be clear on managing expectations around the plexiglass. They've been ordered for where we'll have essentially some spaces where the students can't be, with the best intention, 1 meter apart, where sometimes there might be desks where students might be 1 meter apart, but they're facing each other, and that's an absolute, that's unacceptable. So in those unique cases, as Stacey Zucker said, we've ordered them and expect them to be in next week. I just want to manage the expectation that it's not plexiglass around each student at each desk. The plan is, as trustees have seen, the mock classrooms have desks 1 meter apart facing the front. But we know in some cases there might be desks for students maybe facing each other or facing each other. Even if they're 1 meter apart, we want to have that plexiglass barrier in place. So they cannot use those spaces until those plexiglass are in. But as Stacey said, they were ordered last week, and the expected delivery is this week. And students will be in their class on the Monday and Tuesday, the 14th and 15th. And so that's a critical time to have that. So although they're expected they're expected this week, we still have some time for next week because the students won't be in full class next week in our schools. Through the chair.
Trustee Archer?
Thank you. So if a parent is confused as to when their child is starting or which day, they are to contact their school.
I'm seeing the head nod of Director Figueredo. But Director Figueredo,
I can hear it.
Comment?
I can hear it. I'm just confirming. Thank you.
Okay. So is that complete your questions then, Trustee Archer?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so I now have my own questions. A number of them have been asked. I'll just go quickly on page 3-3 under masks. If we could, I know for the City of Hamilton's bylaw in terms of exception criteria, there was sort of criteria that if a child refuses to wear their mask under the age of 5 and cannot be persuaded to do so, that they would not be required them to wear a mask. Just wondering if we could have a comment around whether that exception was also considered when working with public health. And I'll go to Peter Sovereign, Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I will ask Superintendent Stefanian, as she's been the one working very closely with Hamilton Public Health on this exception.
So through the chair, we did have the conversation with Public Health around the criteria that the city was using for their masking bylaw. Again, a little different in terms of the intent. And as the chair has indicated, the language was speaking certainly to younger children, with the decision for Hwdsb to look at masking for kindergarten through to grade 12. We made the decision after having conversations with Public Health that we wanted to land on criteria that aligned with Ontario Public Health Services, as well as Sick Kids Hospital, and speak to medical, developmental, sensory, or mental health reasons in which a student is unable to wear a mask, as well as the criteria if a student is physically unable to either put the mask on or off independently, or they have difficulty breathing. So we certainly did have the conversation, but looking at the guideline document presented by the Ministry of Education, seeing a different intent, and that's the reason we landed on the criteria we did.
And I absolutely respect that you're looking at it in particular for all age groups, but I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity to go back for specifically the younger years. I think I had assumed that our criteria would line up more with the City of Hamilton's in that sense. So just wondering if there might be an opportunity to have more of a conversation around what might be differentiated criteria, especially for the younger years. And if not, I understand, but I would want to better understand why there would be a difference between the cities and our own if it's the same public health unit. So I'll leave that with you or with staff. The next is item E on page 3.4. So with regards to secondary cohorts, it mentioned August 31st, which of course is today. So if individuals log online today, will they be able to find out what cohort they're in for secondary? To Peter Sovereign.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. In some instances, yes. In some instances, that work is still continuing, and so we would just ask that parents and students continue to check back. The reason for any delay is, again, simply to try and ensure that we align the transportation cohort with the particular in-class and the class sizes. So some have started today, but not all are there.
Thank you. And what would be the kind of the absolute date where information would be communicated? Because otherwise, I know a number of parents continue to contact us and email us. So is there a date where they should absolutely have that information? If they don't have it, then they should be concerned? Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. So again, our goal was to have it ready for today. And again, looking at the complexities of this, staff are continuing to work to be able to get this populated as quickly as possible. We don't have an end date, because our end date was really today to have it available. So as soon as it's ready, it will be populated. This is live information. So what you're seeing in the parent portal is the information that is in our student information system so that there isn't any delay. As always, if there are concerns, they may contact the school, but I would suggest that at least for a few days more, that they continue to check the portal to see if the information has been updated, and then, of course, as time goes on, if there's still a concern, they can contact the school. So I do know that everyone is working as fast as they can to get this information accurate and available.
Thank you so much. And I'll just ask, just to be noted on the communications, that perhaps we can let parents know that if they don't see the parent portal working or their cohort updated, to just keep checking back over the next few days, because otherwise people may become concerned and then be prompted to reach out. So just a communication piece there. My next question, again, is for you, Associate Director Sovereign. Can you please explain what the difference is between e-learning versus if a student was to continue with their regular courses but just not attend the in-person? Because I believe that there is, in particular, I know some parents seem to think that with e-learning you could return on the indicated dates of October, January, and March. So if you could clarify what the difference is between the two options for secondary.
Yes, and through you, the chair, I will begin, and then I'll ask Superintendent Torrens if he has anything to add. But selecting e-learning in terms of a delivery mode, no different than in other years. Students would be selecting a particular class and a mode of delivery that moving out of that class would often be extremely challenging in any given year, let alone this year with our reopening. And the reason for that is that as students are timetabled into e-learning and teachers are assigned to e-learning courses, they are often not within the same school, and at times not even within the same board, because as we've indicated previously, we're fortunate to participate in a consortium of school boards that offer e-learning. And so when a student does have an e-learning course in their timetable or a suite of e-learning courses in their timetable, the expectation is that they would continue with that mode of delivery for the entire semester. And that's not any different this year than it has been in past years. And so if a student does elect a full timetable of e-learning courses, those transition points really wouldn't be relevant. Those transition points are most relevant for our elementary schools, and perhaps we can clarify that even further. In our secondary schools, e-learning selection is for the duration of the semester. And if a student were to continue with the rotational model, then those transition dates, again, aren't as relevant because the student remains part of their class. A student is not leaving that class and going to a different school with a different teacher. They remain part of that class at all times, and that's why those transition dates, again, aren't as relevant. But I'll pause there. I'll ask if Superintendent Torrens has anything further to add in terms of the e-learning.
Thank you, Associate Director Sovereign, and through the chair, no, I don't.
Thank you. And I think, Associate Director, just the final comment that you made, that providing perhaps some additional clarification up on the website would be great in terms of that if you're registering for e-learning, that would mean that you wouldn't be transitioning back into a class. That just provide some more clarification around that, because I think that there's just a bit of confusion with all the information coming about all the different options available. My next question has to do with when should parents anticipate hearing from their own schools with regards to site-specific plans? So, for example, where they would be meeting up in the morning on the school property. When would we expect that? Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So certainly starting this week, the week of August 31st, our schools, our principals and the staff in our offices in our schools, and the remaining staff will be engaged in a lot of professional learning over the next few days through the assigned professional activity days. But then on top of that, they are working to connect with their communities, whether it be through a messenger, whether it be through the school website, or any other means, to begin to communicate some of those local specific routines. As we've indicated in the report and as highlighted by our Manager of Communications, Sean McKillop, some of that will remain supported through our system communications, but the very specific individual routines at schools will start and continue throughout this week and into the start of next week. Part of the adjustment to our staggered start is, again, to facilitate all of the transitions, which includes communicating to families some of the newly established routines.
Okay. So thank you very much. And then my next question is page 35G on sign language, on signage. And I know that we've had some communication from, various members of the community wanting to ensure that signage will be, conducive to students that are colorblind. I just want to clarify, has adjustments been made to our signage in order to reflect that feedback that we received? Associate Director Sovereign?
Thank you. And through the chair, so the short answer is yes, but I will ask Superintendent Stefanian to provide some more specifics.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question, and through the chair, yes, we absolutely appreciate feedback from our community on the photos and the drafts that have been seen out in the community, and we have through working with other school boards, looked at other options that exist, and appreciate the support of my colleague, Superintendent Blair, in that outreach, and we are adjusting the signage in response to what we've heard. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And then I'll just note, because we were asked by a community member if the Outbreak Protocol would be available to the public, and I see that the link is embedded in the report, so it is. And then I just wanted to note with regards to the section on mental health on 3-6, that how important and critical this work is, and how much I appreciate the work that staff has put into this area. I know that when we think about the startup years from now, we will be thinking about how we won't necessarily remember the new math curriculum. We will very likely remember the challenging startup that we had this year. But I think that what's going to be left in our minds forever is how we treat each other when we go back to school. So how our students are made to feel welcome, how we are reconnecting with each other as staff, and working to support families during this very difficult time. And I think it's those moments, and in particular the mental health piece, that will remain with us. And that's why that piece in particular is going to be so important. So I just wanted to note that. My questions around remote learning were largely asked. I guess in continuation though, when would families that are part of the remote school of learning, when would they start to receive connections from, say, that school or the assigned principal that will be assigned to the school? When will they start receiving those communications? Associate Director Sovereign.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm going to ask Superintendent Torrens to speak to this.
Thank you. And through the chair, currently our planning has the teachers in the remote school reaching out to their students and their caregivers on Thursday the 10th of September and Friday the 11th of September. I do also expect a communication from one of the three principals of the school. We're in a co-principal model due to the size. That they will be in contact as well with caregivers.
Thank you. And if we could pop some communication up on the website about that, that would be appreciated too. With regards to page 310, where we have the sample days, how many of our schools, out of curiosity, have 5 courses compared to 4 for secondary?
Thank you, and thank you, and through the chair. So just to clarify, secondary school students, by and large, with a few exceptions, would take a full course load of 4 courses in any given semester. Schools, however, are organized in a 4-period or a 5-period day. The 4-period day would have a common lunch. The 5-period day, one of those periods is in fact a lunch period for the particular student because there isn't enough space within the school, let's say, for all students to be in classrooms and then to have a common lunch. So just to make it clear, it's not that students in a 5-period school are taking 5 courses. They're still taking 4 courses. It's just the way it's operationalized in terms of the size of their building.
Sorry, and what? But how many schools have that 5-period structure? Do we know, or?
Yes, there are 5 of our secondary schools have the 5-period structure.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to kind of visualize how many were being impacted. I did want to ask clarification with regards to 318, so this will be going to Associate Director Zucker. With regards to the $400,000, it was mentioned that money could be used or will be used to reduce students on buses. Is that or physical distancing? Can you clarify exactly what that money would be used for? Would that be to hire more bus drivers, or exactly how would that money be applied? Associate Director Zucker?
Thank you, and through the chair, that's what we are reviewing because that is one of the suggestions for it. The other is to accommodate local pressures. So we would be looking at where our pressure points are and what the possible solutions are, and then the cost of those solutions. So it's something that as a consortia will look at and then bring to the Transportation Governance Committee for a recommendation as to what to do with that funding.
Thank you. And that's the federal funding? Associate Director Zucker?
Thank you, and through the chair, it is coming to us from the province, but yes, the province, it was announced on Thursday after the province received more money from the federal government.
Thank you for that clarification. And then I did want to make a quick comment on the class size. Thank you to all of our staff with regards to reaching the number of 21. I do want to note that our board is fortunate that we are able to, that A, that we have that funding, and B, that we were able to reach that goal. Across the province, there is huge inequities. I am aware of school boards whose reserve funds only cover the additional costs that they're facing for PPE or for remote learning, and they're not able to use any of the funding to actually reduce class sizes. So it's fortunate for us, but it's very disappointing that we do not have consistency on this matter across the province. I have two final questions. So one is with regards to, there was a question earlier from Trustee Galindo about whether school councils could purchase air filters. I just wanted to make, I guess it's not a question so much as a comment, that we do need to have equity, and that it would be unfair if certain schools were able to purchase more resources compared to others. And so whatever the decision is made in this matter, that perhaps it's that kind of funding is pooled together, I am not sure. But there does need to be an assurance of equity across the system, particularly as it comes to health. And the last question actually is from our student trustee, Ethan Hessler. He had missed this question earlier, so I'm going to ask it on his behalf. How will the IB program be able to operate remotely for tasks such as IAs or IB exams? And I'll turn to Associate Director Sovereign, please.
Thank you very much, and through the chair, great question, student trustee. Again, I'm going to ask Superintendent Torrens one more time if he can reply to this question, because it does fall within many of our specialized programs that we do offer.
Thank you, and through the chair, we'll work closely with both Westdale and Ancaster High Schools or secondary schools to support our IB students who do choose to go remotely. When it comes to their exams, certainly we will follow the International Baccalaureate's guidelines in terms of proctoring a remote exam. That may, if able to, that may require students to actually come to a physical location rather than being able to do that exam online. But as we move through the semester, the program division will support both schools in ensuring that students do not miss any opportunities.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that. So that actually concludes all of my questions this evening, and that also concludes the speakers list. With that, I'll ask for a motion to receive. So I'll have that moved by Trustee Buck, seconded by Trustee Maria Felix Miller. Do we have anyone voting against the motion to receive the report this evening? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And we'll move on to item 4, report from Committee of the Whole from earlier this evening, August 31st, 2020. And I'll turn to Vice Chair. Oh, sorry, I have to bring it. My apologies. So I will bring forward the report, which is that the tentative collective agreement between the Canadian Office and Professional Employees, Local 527, and the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board for the term of September 1st, 2019 to August 31st, 2022 be approved and amended as per the School Board's Collective Bargaining Act. So I will bring that forward, and I'll have that seconded by Trustee. That'll be moved by the Chair of HR, Trustee Deese, seconded by Trustee Galindo. And to that, do we have any trustees voting against? Hearing none, that does pass unanimously. On behalf of the HWDSB Board of Trustees. I would like to congratulate our staff as well as our union, COPE Local 527, for the tremendous amount of work that went into reaching this joint agreement. And throughout the summer, many meetings were had, and we are thrilled to see that a collective agreement has been reached for all of us. So to that, that does complete the meeting this evening. I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn. Of course, that's always put forward by Trustee Tutt, seconded tonight by Trustee Archer. Do we have anyone voting against? Hearing none, that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. And good night.
Trustee Danko.
Left, 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 left. The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.